Okay, Push, here we go. So on your paper format, the first thing that I want to point out is that the header is actually incorrect on the template that I gave you, and that it doesn't give you a little spot that says last name here. Your last name goes there. So you just type it in as I have done so here. Now citations, that's the focus. Your citations belong, as a rule, after any information from a source. That's especially a quote. If you have quotation marks, you need a citation after it. But that also includes paraphrased information. So anything that you sort of summarize yourself, if that information came from another source, whether it be primary or secondary, you need to cite it. So that means if you've got this piece of information here that came from some dude named Frank's website, then you need to cite that down here. Okay. That particular fact may stand alone, might be really interesting, etc., and it might be the basis for your whole paragraph of analysis here, in which case you cite it, and then you move on. Cite after the information. If you're going to switch topics, authors, sources, or whatever, after that you need to complete the citation, and then the following bit of information will have its own. Now, if this sentence right here is then analysis, something that you are interpreting, part of your argument, something that relates back to your thesis, great. You don't need to cite that because that was your work. Same thing here, etc. If this sentence and the following information all comes from another source, or maybe is talking about another historian who is corroborating the argument that you're making, you need to cite that. And that's what this citation right here is for. Okay, so that, in this case, in this example, that also came from our guy Frank. Now, if, and I'm going to, for the sake of consistency, I'm going to put timeline there just so we know it came from the same place. So the rule is, if you switch sources of information, you need to put a citation before the switch. By the way, your citation notes always go after the punctuation, never inside a punctuation. You can have, after that, you can have your analysis or another source, and then you need to cite it if it's another source. That's essentially the rule. All right, so when we're looking at Purdue L, remember we only do footnotes, not endnotes in here. That's why I didn't just show you a different video, because almost a bunch of the other teachers that I found use endnotes. I think that those are sloppy and inconvenient. So if you look at the Purdue L manual, you are looking for the notes when you're doing your sources here. So if you are old school and or awesome and use an actual physical book, here is your note format for a footnote. All right, first name, last name, comma, italicized title of the book, and then in parentheses, the place of publication, colon. This, by the way, place of publication, that's usually a city like Boston or New York or Chicago or something like that. You do not need to put New York, New York. You do not need to put Boston, Massachusetts. Those are well-known enough cities that you can just put Boston, colon, the publisher, and the year. Also your page number or your range of pages that you used, okay, as you can see down here, 128. So you can see they also did the New York thing right there. Everybody knows where New York is. If you've got multiple authors, organize them in the order that they appear, okay, not necessarily alphabetically. The reason that they do that is because, for example, our textbook, or actually the one last year is a better example because there were more authors. The Stearns book has a bunch. Stearns was the primary. So we want to respect that based on the order that they do things. So going back to this, remember, if you are using a piece of information from the same source, you use Ibid. Now, why on earth would we need to cite 2 times in a row from the same source? If this sentence came from source 1, came from this book here, first name, last name, title of the book, then we would want to cite that. After that, we might have a sentence of explanation or, linkage or something to another idea, and then this information may come from a second location in that same source, in that book, and then you need to cite it. So that means you're not just going to cite the entire paragraph as our guy last name here, because, or gal last name, because this information is coming from 2 different places inside of that book, and that makes a difference. Additionally, if you've put information of your own in here, you don't want that cited as somebody else's work. All right, so there are going to be quite a few footnotes, but handily, you can just do Ibid. Remember, that stands for in the same place as the last citation above it. So that means if I've got a whole bunch of things in a row that are all from last name here, then I am going to put footnote, footnote, footnote. They could all say Ibid, as long as I don't change authors, or sources rather. So once you change a source, you can no longer use Ibid. So if I switch to Frank, after using last name for all this time, if I switch to Frank, then I can use Ibid if it's in Frank, but I cannot use Ibid if it goes back to last name. I will need to use the short form for that. So the short form for this is pretty straightforward. I believe they have it on here. They don't, that's boring. What you can do for this is, all right, so if we wanted something between 3 and 4 here, and say, oh, by the way, that was actually from a different location. Remember, Control-Alt-F is your friend. That inserts your footnotes. Then you will just go last name, comma, and then the page number. Say it's 183. Okay, done. Now, if you have more than one text by this author last name, then you're going to want to put, the title, Book 2, ominously. And that page number might be very different. Not that that matters for the purposes of this demonstration. You'll notice that the font sizes are different down here. This drives me absolutely batty. You may choose either to use font size 12 or 10 for your citations. This is a Google Docs hang-up. For whatever reason, you can't change the font style for certain things. So this should also technically not be double-spaced down here. But that's beside the point. The way that Google Docs handles font styles is very boring, and I won't go into it. All right, so those are your citations for that type of thing. And don't forget, if you are then talking about, let's say, oh yeah, we need to cite this right here, solicitudinen, or whatever. So you cite that. If it came from Frank timeline, you can do Ibid. You'll notice that the web sources are a little bit different. They don't have a page number on them. They have a section name. So if this website was actually something about, I don't know, Thomas Jefferson and his very interesting opinions. Now, if that's the name of the website and there's a section under a header called timeline, then that's what we would put here. Okay. Otherwise, you would put and then say, this came from the same source, came from Frank, and there's another section in there called shortbread is the only thing that's coming to mind. He has very interesting opinions on shortbread, and that's what you're talking about in this sentence right here. Obviously, the vocab should tip you off. Your bibliography then down here. This is going to be sorted just a little bit differently. It's last name, comma, first name. And then all of your sources appear down here. So as you have used your sources in your footnotes, you keep track of those. And then each individual source that you use gets listed down here. Each book and each web page. Each periodical article that you use. And by the way, if you're using periodicals, remember, those are here under periodicals. Those are any of your regularly published journals. You can go to electronic journals down here, and there's your format. Very, very handy. Okay, make sure that you use that correctly. If you do not have a published date for things, you use the access date. Okay, and that applies mostly to web sources, but anyway. We're getting all over the place now. So your bibliography is sorted by last name. If you do not have a last name for whatever reason for your website, so for example, you're using one of those websites that doesn't have authors listed because the staff write it, it'll go title of web page. You will sort it, your bibliography, by alphabet, of course, alphabetically, but by the first present word in each entry. All right, I think that pretty much sums up the way that's going to work. If you guys have questions, don't bother putting a comment here. I will never read it. Go ahead and just ask me in class or send me an email or something of that nature. In terms of advice, make sure that you err on the side of citing too much. It doesn't matter if you have a ton of footnotes at the end of your page. I will not think you're fluffing your paper because I am counting words. Okay, remember, and to check your word count, by the way, you're going to select the body of your paper. And then you're going to go up to Tools, and then you're going to hit Word Count, and then it will tell you you've got 419 words. 484 is your total, including your title page and your bibliography. Okay, but those never count towards your word count. But as far as citing is concerned, err on the side of too many citations. And then I would rather have to mark off like this citation not necessary, rather than say this information was potentially plagiarized. What's going on here? All right, don't bother liking or subscribing. I probably won't do this again. Have a lovely day.